Daryl. Oh yes, you're on. Daryl is an historian, writer and educator of 40 years standing in Australia and India, wherein lies the tale, but not the one he'll tell now. Over to you.
Thank you very much, thank you. My interest in the topic first arose some 20 years ago when I lived and worked in India as a school teacher. I have all the slides, oh no I don't. I was riding on my motor scooter one day through the city of Pune and discovered a Commonwealth War Grave cemetery in which there were the graves of 7 Australians, RAAF. And I must admit, I thought, what on earth were you doing in the city of Moran, which is 250 k's inland? But that'll be for another book. Well, let's look at the Air Force. After the capture of Rangoon and the ejection of the British from Burma, the goals of the Burma campaign became twofold. Firstly, clearly to recapture Burma, especially the key ports at Rangoon, and then secondly to continue to supply the nationalist Chinese forces either by road or air. And it soon became apparent that to do so they needed properly equipped and deployed air forces. Now, Australian airmen in the Burma theatre is not who we think first of when we think of RAAF in World War II. But from the best of our records, we've been able to track down about 1,500 Australians who served in that theatre. Andrew and I are currently working on our next book, which tells the story of the RAAF in Burma. We're completing the first nominal roll, our casualty list, and decorations list. But I won't tell you more, you'll never buy it. So, unlike all the other theatres of war that the Australians fought in Burma, there were no RAAF squadrons. And that in itself is a story. So the Australians were absorbed into RAF squadrons, joining the multinational crews. They flew with from the UK, Canada, South Africa, New Zealand. Some Australian air crew had joined the RAF in England either before the war or at the very beginning of the war. Some were already in India and Burma in 1941, and later hundreds more would arrive through the Empire Air Training Scheme. A small number of men, we've discovered, a small number of Australians flew with the very tiny Indian Air Force in its first few days. And when you look on the cover of In the Fight, the dude on the right is Brian Snowball, who flew with the Indian Air Force and also the RAF a little bit later on. There you go. And even another Australian flew with the even tinier Burma Volunteer Air Force, which the British had equipped with the latest in Tiger Moth aircraft. So Australian airmen served in every single type of aircraft, every single type of role that you can think of in the theatre, which stretched from Ceylon to India, to Burma, to China, and included bombing raids into Vietnam, Malaysia, and the Indian Ocean. And it was widely recognised in this theatre that the main cause of casualties was not the Japanese fighters, but the wild, fierce and unpredictable monsoon weather. That often curtailed all flying operations between May and October. You count the number of months between May and October when flying could not happen or did at own risk. Some aeroplanes had all the paint stripped off them in flight during monsoon weather. And after wings continued to fall off during flight, the famous wooden de Havilland Mosquito fighter plane had to be grounded, well, the pieces that were still together, and the aeroplanes had to be painted silver because it was discovered that the dark camouflage paint had allowed infrared rays to get in and destroy the glue holding the wooden plane together. Sadly, a number of Australians are recorded to have died that way, including Wing Commander Harley Storm. Aircrew also had to cope with being accommodated in temporary grass huts, trying to avoid malaria, deadly snakes, wild animals, monsoonal rains and storms, all pervasive mud and dust, very little home leave, jungle living and continual redeployments trying to keep up with operations. And the two guys up in the top left are twins, the Payne twins, who came from Beaumaris, just a little further down the road here. They both survived. So by late 1944, there were over 1,000 Australian aircrew in the theatre. And in addition to combat roles, they filled non-operational posts, headquarters, admin, training, test pilots, ferry pilots. There is the famous story of a Australian test pilot who flew every single sort of plane, who clocked up almost more hours than any other pilot in the theatre, who was denied the Burma Star because he hadn't been on operations. Eventually, I think truth, justice and the Australian way won out. Some of these IAAF people acted as air-ground liaison officers. Now, I never knew this. So when Ord Wingate's Chindit operations were operating deep behind Japanese lines, Australians were working the radios and bringing in the supplies. So here they shared the dangers of firefights against the Japanese, crossing the fast flowing rivers, or struggling to obtain food or even just to maintain their health. In the second Chindit operation in 1944, one Australian air coordinator, Harry Hallgrave, single-handedly managed the landing of hundreds of American and British transport planes onto a jungle landing strip. Australians served in the air transport squadrons. You can see them here. You've done all your training. Just think how you are. You've got your wings, you're flying, you're part of the RAAF, the flyboys, and your job is to kick supplies out of the plane. Imagine riding that home to mum and dad. Well, a lot of them flew over the hump, that is, from northern India to China. This was a 500 to 800 kilometre flight, and it had to cross the Himalayas at heights of 18,000 feet. There were no reliable charts, virtually no radio communication or navigation, and perpetually bad weather. The hump route became known as the Aluminium Trail because nearly 600 transport craft crashed along that way due to unpredictable weather, navigational errors, pilot error, or the occasional Japanese fighter. Air transport squadrons in Burma changed the face of warfare, and they grew in number as the value of airdrops of supplies to units in incredibly difficult terrain was recognised. Cargo could be everything from saboteurs to secret agents, to mules, to goats, to money, to arms, to food, to fuel or VIP prisoners. Live goats were parachuted to Indian regiments for food. Packed mules were incredibly cantankerous passengers. One mule had to be shot mid-flight because it got loose and ran around the cargo hold of the plane. They had trouble with the mules as well. They kept chewing the pilot's hair when they got loose. So some bright spark turned the mules around the other way with the obvious results. Okay, the Australian War Memorial holds archives and registers of casualties. These are handwritten in blue or black fountain pen. And deaths, etc., we think about 320 Australians died as a result of service in Burma. A lot of them were seen to crash. Pilots describe, "I saw the plane crash into the jungle. I flew over the scene, but there was absolutely no trace of them. The jungle had just swallowed them up." The general commanding the 14th Army in Burma, Sir William Slim, believed that courage was the foundation of all virtues because It allowed leaders to inspire confidence in others. Australian airmen received over 150 honours and awards during the Burma campaign, including DSOs, DFCs, DFMs, la 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 la. Just two stories for me to finish with, but there are many, many. Andrew will tell you the one or three. So, Blenheim bomber, there's pilot, there's gunner, there's navigator. Pilot is shot through the heart, dead, flying plane. The navigator doesn't know what to do. They get the pilot, put him in a parachute because he might still be alive, and they throw him out of the plane. And they try to land, but the navigator doesn't know what to do. So in the end, they all parachute out as well and manage to survive. But let's talk about Crombie at the far right-hand side. Flight Lieutenant Charles Crombie, DSO, Distinguished Service Order, DFC, Distinguished Flying Cross. He got his decorations in this way. The DSO acknowledged his bravery in Burma after he shot down 2 Japanese aircraft, but his plane also began to catch fire. He ordered his crewmen to bail out, and he continued to attack the 3rd Japanese airplane, only parachuting to safety as the his own plane exploded. Squadron leader Morford, DFC and Bar, that means he won the DFC twice. He commanded 355 Squadron in the RAF. And again, it was a bit unusual for Australians to get command because those British, don't you know, thought that the colonials were, well, helpful. Morford, flying, one of his engines on his Liberator bomber stops working, so he orders the crew out. He flies over friendly territory. He orders his crew to parachute while he remains at the controls. But by now, the aircraft was too low to allow for his own successful parachute descent. And so in the darkness, in the middle of the night, Morford attempted to land the plane, even though by now all the engines had stopped. The bomber crashed. Yet somehow, Morford survived and laconically wrote home afterwards, "Well, I put the aircraft down in a clearing in the jungle at 1:30 in the morning, and in the pouring rain, I hit a few trees. Well, I don't remember anything more till the late morning, when I woke up to find that I was lying in a swamp with a fractured skull, 2 fractured legs, a broken shoulder and a hole in my ribs. Apart from that, all is well." Well, Sir William Slim's view that courage was the foundation of all virtues, I don't believe was better personified in the bravery and the leadership of people like Charles Crombie and Joseph Morford and their fellow RAAF crew in the Burma campaign. Thank you.
Thank you, Daryl. And well done to Daryl and Andrew for sticking to time. Sorry, you might think that's my only interest in today's proceedings, they stick to time, but it practically is.